The first knock came from underneath the floorboards. Not outside the cabin. Not at the door. Directly under my feet. 3 slow knocks, like someone was trapped beneath the wooden floor and knew I was standing above them. I froze so hard I nearly dropped my flashlight. I was working night security for a logging company deep in the mountains near the border of Montana. The company had shut down operations for the winter, but equipment theft had become a problem, so they hired a few guards to rotate overnight shifts at the old supply camp. The place was isolated. One dirt road in. Forest for miles around. No phone signal unless you drove 30 minutes uphill. I was alone that week. The cabin they gave me looked like it had survived 3 different fires and lost every time. Thin walls. Rusted stove. One radio that only worked when it wanted to. My job was simple. Stay there from sunset until sunrise. Check the fuel shed every hour. Watch for trespassers. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. No animals. No owls. Nothing. Just wind moving through dead trees. Around midnight on my 4th night I heard the knocking. 3 slow taps under the floor. Knock. 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 At first I honestly thought it was an animal trapped beneath the cabin. Maybe a raccoon or something. The cabin stood a few feet above the ground on wooden supports, leaving a crawlspace underneath. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The cold hit me instantly. Sharp mountain air. The kind that burns your lungs. The forest around me was black. Completely black. My flashlight barely reached the nearest trees. I crouched near the cabin and pointed the beam underneath. Nothing. Just dirt. Rocks. Old beer cans. Then I heard movement behind me. Fast footsteps. Crunching through snow. I spun around immediately. Nothing there. The trees stood perfectly still. I remember laughing nervously to myself. Trying to act tough even though my heart was hammering. I went back inside and locked the door. About 20 minutes later, the radio crackled alive. Not a voice. Just static. Then breathing. Slow breathing. I grabbed the radio fast. Hello. The breathing stopped. Then came a clicking sound, like someone pressing their tongue against their teeth. Click. 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 The signal died. I told myself it had to be interference. Maybe another guard messing with me. But deep down, something felt wrong. Around 2 a.m., I started hearing footsteps outside the cabin. Slow circles. Crunch. 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 Like someone walking around the building. I killed the lantern and stayed completely silent. The footsteps continued for almost 10 minutes. Never rushing. Never stopping. Just circling me. I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the window. At first I saw nothing. Then the flashlight beam caught something near the trees. A man. Standing perfectly still. Tall. Heavy winter coat. No flashlight. He was maybe 30 yards away. Just watching the cabin. I shouted, asking who he was. No response. He didn't move. I grabbed the rifle the company left in the cabin and stepped outside. The second I opened the door, he walked into the trees. Not ran. Walked. Slowly. Like he knew I wouldn't follow. And he was right. I stayed awake the rest of the night with the rifle across my lap. Morning finally came. I reported the man to my supervisor over the radio. He sounded annoyed more than concerned. Said hunters sometimes wandered through the area. But hunters carry lights. Hunters answer when you yell at them. The next night felt worse from the start. The forest had this strange silence again. No wind. No sound. At 1 a.m., I found footprints outside the cabin. Fresh ones. Circling the building. Dozens of them. The snow was packed deep from repeated walking. But what scared me was the pattern. The prints came from the forest. And went back into the forest. But none led toward the road. Whoever it was had been living out there. Watching me. That realization changed everything. I suddenly felt exposed. Like the cabin wasn't shelter anymore. It was a trap. I checked the locks 3 times. At around 3 a.m., the generator suddenly shut off. The cabin went black instantly. No lights. No heater. Nothing. Then I heard movement underneath the floor again. Dragging this time. Slow scraping. Like someone crawling beneath me. I pointed my flashlight at the floorboards. The sound stopped directly below my chair. Silence. Then a whisper. Not supernatural. Real. Human. Very quiet. Come outside. Every hair on my body stood up. I backed away from the floor. The whisper came again. Your truck. I looked out the window immediately. My truck headlights were on. Driver door open. I knew for a fact I locked it earlier. Then I saw him again. The same man. Standing beside my truck. Only this time he wasn't alone. There were 2 others near the trees. I suddenly understood everything. The footsteps. The circling. The whispering. They had been testing me. Seeing if I'd come outside alone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the rifle. One of the men suddenly slammed both hands against the truck hood. Bang! I jumped so hard I nearly fired. Then all 3 started moving toward the cabin. Slowly. Calmly. Like they knew there was nowhere for me to go. I screamed that I had a gun. They kept walking. I fired 1 warning shot through the window. The sound exploded through the mountains. The men stopped. For a second nobody moved. Then one of them smiled. I could see it clearly in the flashlight beam. That smile still ruins my sleep. Because it wasn't nervous. It wasn't angry. It looked excited. Then the cabin door handle started turning. Slowly. Carefully. I held the rifle aimed at the door while they whispered outside. I couldn't understand the words. Just low voices and quiet laughing. Then came scratching at the walls. Metal scraping wood. They were trying to find a weak spot. I realized the cabin wouldn't hold them for long. So I made a choice. I ran out the back. The second I burst into the snow, I heard shouting behind me. They chased me immediately. I ran blindly through the trees with only a flashlight and the rifle. Branches hitting my face. Snow up to my knees. I could hear them crashing through the forest behind me. Closer. Closer. One of them yelled. Don't let him reach the road. That sentence terrified me more than anything else. Because it meant this wasn't random. They planned this. I finally spotted the old maintenance shed near the slope and dove inside, slamming the door shut behind me. No lock. I shoved a rusted shelf against the entrance and killed my flashlight. Outside, footsteps circled the shed. Breathing. Coughing. One of them tapped lightly on the metal wall. Tap. 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 Then another voice spoke right outside the door. You should have stayed in the cabin. I held the rifle aimed at the entrance for what felt like hours. Right before sunrise, I heard engines in the distance. The logging crew. The footsteps outside stopped instantly. By the time workers reached the shed, the men were gone. But they found something outside the cabin. A large hunting knife stuck into my truck door. And carved into the frost-covered window were 3 words. We almost had you. The knocking started at exactly 2:13 a.m. 3 slow taps on the fire lookout tower door, deep in the mountains where nobody was supposed to be for another 40 miles. I froze with my coffee halfway to my mouth because 5 minutes earlier I had watched a man walk into the trees below the tower, and never come back out. I used to work seasonal fire watch in northern Montana. Just me, a radio, and a wooden tower sitting above miles of black forest. Most nights were boring. Wind. Owls. Trees creaking. That kind of thing. But during my last month there, something happened that still screws with my sleep. The tower sat on top of a rocky ridge surrounded by thick pine forest. The nearest ranger station was over an hour away by dirt road, and radio signal got bad during storms. I worked nights because lightning strikes were common that summer. That night started normal enough. Cold wind. No moon. Clouds moving low across the mountains. Around midnight, I noticed movement near the tree line below the tower. At first I thought it was a deer, but then I saw a flashlight. Someone was hiking up the mountain. That already felt wrong. The trail to the tower was closed after dark. There were warning signs everywhere because the cliffs around the ridge were dangerous at night. I grabbed the binoculars and looked closer. It was a man wearing dark clothes and carrying a backpack. He moved slowly, stopping every few seconds like he was checking behind him. I radioed the ranger station, but all I got back was static. The guy reached the clearing below the tower around 1:30. I expected him to call out or climb the stairs. Instead, he just stood there. Completely still. Even from above I could tell something was off about him. He kept turning his head toward the woods behind him, like he was listening for something. Then suddenly he took off running. Straight into the trees. No flashlight. No yelling. Nothing. Just disappeared into the dark forest. I remember standing there confused, staring into the woods. The trees were thick enough that after a few seconds I couldn't see him anymore. Then I heard it. Branches snapping. Fast footsteps. Not one set. Two. I felt this cold pressure in my stomach immediately. Somebody had been behind him. The sound stopped after maybe 10 seconds. Silence came back all at once. I waited for yelling. Or a fight. Anything. Nothing happened. That's when the knocking started upstairs. 3 slow taps against the tower door. Knock. 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 I nearly dropped the binoculars. The tower was 30 feet off the ground. The only way up was the metal staircase bolted to the side. But I hadn't heard anyone climbing it. I remember just staring at the door while my chest tightened. Another 3 knocks came. Slow. Patient. I forced myself to speak. Who's there? No answer. The wind outside had completely died. I could hear my own breathing. Then something scraped lightly across the door. Like fingernails, or maybe metal. I grabbed the emergency flashlight and stepped closer. My hand shook so bad I almost dropped it. Listen, I said louder. You need to identify yourself. Nothing. Then I heard footsteps moving around outside the tower platform. Heavy boots. Slow circles around the building. I backed away from the windows. Whoever was out there knew exactly where I was. The footsteps stopped near the window behind me. I turned slowly. At first I saw nothing except darkness beyond the glass. Then a face moved into view. Not pressed against the window. Just standing a few feet back. A man. White eyes. Pale skin. Breathing hard. It was the hiker I saw earlier. He looked terrified. He raised one shaking finger to his lips, telling me to stay quiet. Before I could react, he suddenly looked toward the stairs behind him. His entire expression changed. Pure panic. Then he ran across the platform out of sight. A second later, another figure stepped into view outside the window. Much taller. Broad shoulders. Wearing a dark hunting jacket. The man moved slowly, casually, like he had all the time in the world. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I noticed something in his hand. A rifle. Every muscle in my body locked up. The guy stopped outside the window and tilted his head slightly, like he knew I was watching him. Then he smiled. I shut off the lantern immediately and dropped to the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. The footsteps continued circling outside. Slow. Crunch. 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 At one point they stopped right outside the door again. Then came a soft voice. Don't let him in. I didn't move. The voice sounded calm. Almost friendly. A few seconds later another voice screamed somewhere down in the trees. The hiker. It was one short scream that cut off instantly. Then silence. Complete silence. I wanted to radio for help again, but I was too scared to even move near the windows. I sat there on the floor gripping the flashlight for what felt like hours while footsteps occasionally creaked outside the tower. Around 4 a.m., I finally heard a vehicle engine climbing the trail below. Rangers. The footsteps outside stopped immediately. I looked through the window just in time to see a dark figure disappearing down the stairs into the forest. The Rangers searched until sunrise. They found the hiker first. About half a mile from the tower. Face down in a dry creek bed. His throat had been cut so deeply it nearly reached his spine. His backpack was gone. At first they thought it was robbery or some random killing. Then one ranger found something near the tower stairs. Fresh boot prints. Large ones. They circled the tower for hours. Just walking around and around while I was trapped inside. But the worst part came later. A detective visited me 2 days afterward. He showed me a photo taken from a hunting cabin 3 counties away. Security camera footage. The killer had been identified. A local hunter with a history of violent assaults. They arrested him hiding in the woods. Then the detective asked me something that still makes me sick. He asked why I never reported the second person at the tower. I told him there were only 2 men. The hiker and the hunter. The detective stared at me for a long time before sliding another crime scene photo across the table. The boot prints around my tower weren't from one person circling it. There were 2 different sets. One large. One barefoot. And the barefoot tracks stopped directly outside my door. They never walked back down the stairs. The first sign that something was wrong was the second flashlight. I was standing alone outside the ranger station, deep in the mountains, when I saw a beam of light moving through the trees below me. Mine was already in my hand. Then the other flashlight switched off. And I realized someone had been watching me without wanting to be seen. I used to work night security at an old logging site in northern Montana. The place had been abandoned for years after part of the mountain road collapsed. Most of the buildings were empty. Rotting cabins. Rusted machinery. Broken fuel tanks half covered in weeds. My job was simple. Stay there from 8 p.m. until sunrise and make sure no one came onto the property. Mostly teenagers. Hunters. Drunk people looking for a place to party. The nearest town was almost an hour away. No signal. No cameras. Just trees and silence. At first, the isolation didn't bother me. I actually liked it. I'd sit in the security shack with a portable heater and listen to the radio while snow hit the windows. But around my 3rd week there, things started changing. Small things at first. I'd leave tools in one place and find them somewhere else. Doors I knew I locked would be cracked open when I came back. Once I found muddy boot prints circling the shack. Not leading to it. Circling it. Like someone had walked around me over and over during the night. I reported it to my supervisor, but he laughed it off. Said it was probably hikers messing around. I wanted to believe that. Then came the breathing. One night around 2 a.m., the generator behind the shack suddenly shut off. Everything went dead quiet. No heater. No humming electricity. Nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside to check it. That mountain silence felt wrong. Heavy. I walked around the back of the shack and froze. I heard breathing. Close. Slow, wet, uneven breathing. At first I thought it was an animal. Maybe a bear. But it sounded too controlled. Like someone trying not to breathe loudly. I swept my flashlight toward the trees. Nothing. The breathing stopped immediately. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds before backing toward the shack. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I heard footsteps. Crunch. Crunch. Slow footsteps moving through the snow beside the trees. Keeping pace with me. Not rushing. Not hiding anymore. Just following. I got inside and locked the door fast. The footsteps stopped right outside the wall. Then came 3 knocks. Very soft. Tap. 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 I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning I searched outside expecting animal tracks. Instead, I found footprints. Bare footprints. Human. In the snow. Whoever it was had been walking around in freezing temperatures without shoes. After that, I started carrying a hunting knife with me. I even thought about quitting, but the money was good and I needed it badly at the time. A week later, the storm came. Heavy snow buried the mountain roads by midnight. My radio kept cutting in and out. Around 1:30 a.m., the power failed again. Only this time, the generator hadn't stopped on its own. The fuel line had been cut. Cleanly. I remember staring at it with this horrible feeling growing in my stomach. Someone didn't want me to have power. Or lights. I went back inside and locked everything. Snow hammered the windows while the shack creaked around me. Then I heard footsteps above me. On the roof. Slow dragging movements. Back and forth. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it upward even though I knew I couldn't see through the ceiling. The dragging stopped. Then something slammed against the door so hard the entire shack shook. I stumbled backward. Another slam. The metal hinges screamed. "Hey!" I yelled before I could stop myself. "I have a weapon." Silence. Then, laughing. Not loud. Not crazy. Quiet laughing. Like whoever was outside knew I was terrified. I backed into the corner holding the knife with shaking hands. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The rear storage door behind me was open. Just slightly. I was sure I'd locked it earlier. The darkness inside that storage room looked almost solid. And then I heard movement in there. Not outside. Inside. A shoe scraping lightly across the concrete floor. I turned my flashlight toward the crack in the door. Nothing moved. But I could hear breathing again. Right there. Maybe 6 feet away. I remember standing completely frozen. My body wouldn't move. Every instinct told me someone had been hiding inside that storage room the entire time while I thought the noises were coming from outside. Then the flashlight beam caught something. An eye. A human eye staring at me through the crack. I ran. I dropped the knife and smashed through the front door into the snowstorm. I didn't care anymore. I just ran downhill through the trees with no direction, hearing footsteps crashing behind me the entire time. Branches tore my face open. I slipped twice. I could barely breathe. But the footsteps stayed close. Not sprinting. Following. Playing with me. Then I saw headlights through the trees near the old equipment road. A snowplow from the county. I screamed and waved my arms until the driver stopped. I climbed inside shaking so badly I couldn't even talk properly. The driver kept asking what happened. I looked back toward the forest one last time. And I saw him. Standing between the trees. Tall. Thin. Barefoot. Completely still. Watching the truck. The police searched the logging site the next day. They found a sleeping area hidden beneath the storage building. Blankets. Food cans. Hunting knives. And photographs. Dozens of photographs of me. Walking outside the shack. Sleeping at the desk. Using the bathroom behind the building. Some pictures were taken from only a few feet away. The worst one was the final photo. It showed me sitting inside the shack on the night I ran. Looking directly toward the camera. The photo had been taken from inside the storage room.